Russia is being torn apart from inside out. Now it's time to chase those searing rails and plunge into the shadowy core of the empire. As we saw, on October 21, 2025, railway workers scanning the vital track from Pskov to St. Petersburg stumbled upon pure chaos below. Picture this: could a stealthy blast in the dead of night shatter the spine of a superpower, turning steel rails and concrete ties into a mangled, smoldering wreck? That's the chilling reality that unfolded. Experts call it precision sabotage, military-grade destruction that sent shockwaves far beyond. Right after the boom, all trains froze in place, north and south. Panic brewed like a storm, passengers screamed in confusion, crowds flooded stations like Moskovsky and Ladovsky in St. Petersburg. Desperate faces pushed against ticket counters, smells of sweat and fear hung heavy in the air. Trips vanished, buses surged with overflow crowds, scrambling for rides home or work. For the first time, war invaded quiet lives, icy announcements slicing through the ordinary, turning routines into terror. But beneath this frenzy lurked a deadlier truth: the Kremlin trembled over more than delays. This track wasn't just civilian routes, it pulsed with army essentials, ammo crates and gear for the front. It fed Russia's northwestern war machine, a vein pumping life to troops. Pskov isn't just a town, it's a hub for the Western Military District, home to the elite 76th Guards Airborne Division. Battered in Ukraine yet still feared, St. Petersburg glows as culture's jewel, but hides an arsenal of war. Kiev plant rebuilding tanks, munition sites churning bombs. Kronstadt anchoring the Baltic Fleet. Between them, this railway acts as a lifeline, shuttling fresh firepower, mended war machines, recruits to staging grounds in Pskov. That blast snapped the cord, halting flows of metal and might. Tanks sat idle, ammo rotted in depots, soldiers stranded, useless. One kaboom clogged the army's pulse, weakening defenses near NATO borders with Finland and Estonia. A tactical win. Or blueprint for chaos. Just weeks before, another boom hit this very line, not random, but a calculated string of strikes. Ukraine's intelligence, the GUR, exploited this gaping flaw, ready to gouge repeatedly until it festers. Does Putin's true dread stem from external strikes? Or insiders turning traitor? Russian partisans like Freedom's Legion. Siberian battalions. Atesh, dig deeper into home soil. Sleeper cells awaken, fueled by rage at the regime's rot. Rails are their dream target, spanning 88,000 kilometers, encircling Earth twice. Guarding every inch. Impossible for a thinned FSB, or depleted Rosgvardia. They don't rely on fancy weapons, it's everyday folk enabling doom. The aged villager shielding rebels in woods, the crooked railman leaking schedules, indifferent cops waving explosives through war's crippling economy. Eroded morals breed silent defiance. Home front erodes, collaborating with foes. Russia arms up futilely, empowering FSB and Rosgvardia for rail watch. Towers sprout like hasty thorns, patrols ramp up in armor, squads seizing suspects on whim. It's a drop in the ocean, elite units bled in Ukraine, reserves hold in Moscow and St. Petersburg to crush rises. Patrols lack fire, incompetent placeholders. Geography's vastness. Now a rebel haven. For Ukraine, this redefines victory. Bypass fortified lines like Pokrovsk, strike the artery feeding Moscow from afar. Expect assaults to flare. Moscow's rails next in crosshairs. Sever them. Starve the capital, army collapses with it. Putin faces ruin, war loss or city siege. Game over. That Pskov echo shattered illusions, war infiltrates veins, empire bleeding internally. Rumors swirl of darker plans, but what if Beijing feels the tremor? She's grand schemes rattled, as rails twist in Russia. How long until flames lick forbidden palaces? Those bent tracks whisper betrayal, alliances fracturing, as a global titan crumbles. What hidden pacts shatter next? And who betrays the betrayers? The real detonation mimics the blast, unseen, but devastating. Will Putin's throne endure? or topple in the wreckage. Previous part rebuilt St. Petersburg as a military powerhouse, not just a cultural hub, but a fortress with colossal tank factories like the Kirov plant, bulging munitions warehouses, and Kronstadt as the pivotal base for Russia's Baltic fleet. That railway route between Pskov and the city served as the vital artery pumping fresh ammo, fixed tanks, and fresh troops to frontline staging grounds. Can you imagine the deafening roar of detonations shattering the night, the acrid stench of melting metal clinging to the air, and the gritty vibration underfoot as a nation's defenses crumble? On October 21, 2025, a single blast severed that pulsing lifeline. Fresh grenades from factories just couldn't move. Repaired tanks sat idle, their heavy steel forms rusting prematurely. New recruits, hearts pounding with false hopes, found their paths to battle blocked. With one clever strike, Ukraine had jammed the army's beating heart, clogging logistics in a foul twist that humiliated Russia's might. This wasn't mere disruption, it paralyzed reinforcements for fragile borders near Finland and Estonia, NATO's bold additions, turning a tactical win into a chilling strategic massacre. And the horror deepens, this wasn't isolated, was it? Weeks before, another thunderous explosion had rocked a nearby stretch of the same line, by shadows who vanished like ghosts. No accident here, just relentless proof of a calculated plot, bleeding the empire dry. Ukrainian spies from the GUR, do you really think they'd stop now? They'd savage this weakness until it rots into something incurable. This sparks a darker query. Is the Kremlin's true terror not distant Western fury, but the poison of their own betrayed souls? Since the war ignited, Russian defectors flipping to Ukraine, like the Legion of Freedom, Siberian Battalion, and Atesh, have crept operations inland, far from home. Not content with raids over borders, they've woven hidden networks inside Russia, silent dissenters, boiling with rage against the rule, poised to ignite. For these ghosts, railways are prime prey, exposed, tempting, and utterly lethal. Picture Russia's web, over 88,000 kilometers of main tracks, looping Earth twice. Putin's grip can't blanket every twisting rail, it's an aching impossibility. So, how can a system failing on this key link possibly shield Moscow's sprawling veins? These partisans could cripple the whole in moonless hours, with smoldering flares on switches or rails buckling in fiery agonies. Yet their true edge? Not fancy Western gadgets or polished explosives. It's everyday Russians aiding them, shattering the facade. The wrinkled villager hiding rebels in misty woods enables the chaos. The crooked railhand leaking whispers of empty tracks versus convoy floods. The lazy cop waving explosives past checkpoints, blind to the load. War's starvation, moral ruins, and seething disdain have twisted Russia's underbelly into quiet allies or snarling foes against their state. This isn't frontline collapse, it's the hinterland allying with invaders. What feudal shields has Russia mustered against this creeping rot? Pathetic responses, really. After these blows, Putin unleashed emergency powers to the FESB, the internal security wolves, and Rosgvardia, the National Guard, to guard those rails. New towers loom along vital paths. Armored beasts prowl more, elite squads at stations ready to snatch suspects on whim. But it's futility incarnate, dousing wildfires with droplets. Russia's manpower, best seasoned in Ukraine's mud or garrisoned against Petersburg uprising fears, can't stretch far. What's left are dreary, undertrained squads, present but hollow. You can't armor every inch of 88,000 kilometers, it's a wolf's howling joke. That sprawling land, once Russia's shield, now echoes as insurgent utopia. This birthed Ukraine a brutal playbook, sidestep fortified lines like Pokrovsk, slice supply veins 1,000 kilometers back toward Moscow with stealthy sabotage. Expect assaults escalating beyond Petersburg, targeting Moscow's feeder crossroads next. Sever those, and it's army starvation plus the capital's suffocation. Putin faces a damned fork, concede war or lose throne. Either way, darkness claims him. Peskov's October 21 blast didn't just twist rails, it peeled Putin's iron invincibility, dragging war into Russia's core, where empire drowns in self-inflicted wounds. Yet, ripples extended to Beijing's walled sanctums, rattling Xi Jinping's globe-spanning dream amid those flaming rails. In the shadows of Russia's endless rails, over 88,000 kilometers snaking like veins across the land, enough to wrap around Earth twice, partisan cells lurk, turning these tracks into their deadliest playground. The regime's grip slips, as ordinary folks fuel the fire of resistance. Imagine this: can a giant empire crumble from whispers in the dark? That's the chilling riddle haunting the Kremlin tonight. Putin's forces, they stretch thin, no army vast enough, no police force tireless, to guard every inch of this sprawling web. The air reeks of rust and desperation, cold metal humming underfoot, as night falls silent. How could they shield Moscow's vital feeders, when even the Peskov to St. Petersburg lifeline bleeds unguarded? It's a puzzle wrapped in fear, this iron backbone feeding the capital, now exposed like a beating heart. These shadow fighters, they strike when the world sleeps. A quick flame licks a signal post, acrid smoke curling into the frost, or gears grind to a halt on a switch, sparks hissing like vipers. Or rails twist in fury, echoing booms that shake the soul. But wait, here's the twist that chills deeper: their strength isn't forged in battle drills, or smuggled tools from afar. No. It surges from the everyday souls they touch. The Kremlin shudders at this truth, buried like a secret grave. Picture an old villager, wrinkled hands clutching a lantern, hiding rebels in pine-scented woods, branches whispering secrets. Or a trackside worker, eyes darting in dim light, spilling when trains rumble empty. Or bulge with war's grim cargo, the ground vibrating with their weight. Even a bored guard at the gate, badge glinting under pale stars, waves through the hidden loads, ignoring the metallic tang of danger. War's cruel hand, it birthed this storm. Empty pockets clink, morals fracture like ice, rage boils against the throne. From society's forgotten edges, resistance rises, quiet nods or bold steps, turning homes against the crown. Is this the home front fracturing? No. Far worse. It's the hearth itself, allying with foes, flames turning inward. So, what desperate walls does Russia throw up against this betrayal from within? The reply? Feeble gestures, drowned in panic's roar. After the blasts echoed, Putin unleashed the EFESB, that iron-fisted internal watch, and Rosgvardia, the National Guard's unyielding shield, granting them unchecked might over the lines. Towers sprouted like wary sentinels, silhouetted against stormy skies, concrete cold to the touch. Armored patrols rumbled louder, engines growling through the mist, their treads churning mud. At every halt, elite squads planted roots, empowered to snag any shadow they eyed, no questions, no mercy in the windswept chill. But does this stem the tide? Or just fan the hidden embers? As these guards fan out, a darker question looms: what if the betrayal runs even deeper, straight to the Kremlin's door? The rails still whisper threats, and the next spark could ignite it all. Imagine the vast Russian landscape, a frozen expanse where shadows hide secrets. But what if one desperate act could unravel an entire empire? In 2025, a single disruption on a key rail line near St. Petersburg exposed the fragility of power, turning a symbol of strength into a web of doubt. Could Putin's iron grip finally slip through his fingers? As security forces scrambled with new watchtowers and patrols along the tracks, their efforts felt futile, like pouring a bucket on a raging wildfire. Russia's leaders poured resources into defense, yet the cracks widened. The elite National Guard units, hardened by years of conflict, were stretched thin. Many had vanished into the chaos of distant battles, or stood ready in Moscow and St. Petersburg, braced for unrest in the streets. The guards posted along the rails? Often weary souls, barely trained, more show than shield. Their boots crunched on gravel, eyes scanning endless horizons, but doubt lingered in the chill air. How do you safeguard 88,000 kilometers of steel veins snaking across a nation? That's enough track to loop the earth twice, an impossible vigil. Russia's boundless lands, once a fortress, now whispered invitations to hidden foes. Vast fields and dense forests became playgrounds for those plotting in silence, where the wind carried echoes of defiance. This unraveling birthed a bold path for Ukraine and its quiet allies. Why clash head-on at fortified barriers, like the tough lines near Pokrovsk, losing countless lives in the mud? Instead, strike deep, sever the supply pulse just beyond Moscow, 1,000 kilometers from the fray. With one precise move. The front crumbles without fuel, without flow. Expect the tension to build. Not just near St. Petersburg's misty canals, but encircling Moscow itself, the pulsing core of it all. Those vital rail hubs nourishing the capital? They're next in line, ripe for the taking. Cut them, and the ripple chokes not only frontline forces, but the city's own breath, its daily rhythm grinding to a halt amid honking horns and frustrated crowds. Picture it, a flashback to a quiet night in the taiga. The scent of pine needles sharp in the nostrils, frost-biting exposed skin. An old rail worker, hands calloused from decades of labor, pauses under starlit sky. He remembers the rumble of trains carrying dreams, now twisted with fear. A soft click in the distance, then silence. What shadows did he glimpse that eve? Putin faces a cruel fork. Yield the fight abroad, or watch his stronghold starve from within. Either way, the board tilts. Victory fades like morning fog over the Neva. That fateful shake on October 21 near Pskov didn't just bend metal. It pierced the regime's shield of certainty. No longer mere lines on a chart in red and blue. The struggle pulses through the nation's core, veins clotting with unrest. But as rails groaned in the dawn light, a deeper tremor reached far beyond borders. Whispers in Beijing's halls stirred. Could this spark ignite alliances anew, or unravel grand designs? The explosion that rocked Pskov on October 21, 2025, didn't just derail a railway line. It cracked the armor of Vladimir Putin's regime, exposing its deepest vulnerabilities. The conflict shifted forever. No longer confined to battle maps, it bled into Russia's core. The war now consumed the empire from within, drowning it in betrayal and chaos. Yet, those roaring flames between Pskov and St. Petersburg, those mangled steel rails twisted like agony, halted more than ammo trains headed for the elite 76th Guards Airborne Division. They stranded civilian travelers yearning for Moscow in cold, frantic stations. But the quake rippled far beyond Russian borders. Shockwaves tore through the guarded halls of the Forbidden City in Beijing. Imagine Xi Jinping's boldest dream unfolding, then shattering. Those detonating rails didn't target just Moscow's logistics, they blasted the northern path of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar artery linking continents via Europe. Has the Ukraine conflict morphed into something monstrous? It's engulfing not just Russia's battered frontier, but its vital bonds with its strongest partner. Picture the frenzy in Beijing right now. Strategists huddle, questioning everything. Was this a fluke, or the start of endless disruption? The scent of fear thickens the air, like gunpowder after a blast. To grasp this disaster, rewind to the fairy tale Moscow and Beijing spun for a decade. They painted a utopia in a world ruled by American maritime might. Eurasia's land highway, the vast Trans-Siberian and Baikal-Amur Railway, promised the ultimate safe passage for China's exports to Europe. These lines formed the backbone of the Belt and Road. Each year, tens of thousands of containers rolled smoothly, evading U.S. Navy threats in choke points like the Strait of Malacca. Steel met steel in friendship. Russia's endless tundra fused with China's manufacturing might. Stability echoed at the core. Exporters in Shanghai and buyers in Berlin trusted Putin's iron grip. They believed the rails stayed clear, schedules sacred, even in an autocracy. But now? A single explosion shatters that trust. Tangible paranoia grips allies. Will more sabotage starve supply chains? Can Xi Jinping salvage his global gamble? The rails twist on, but the illusion crumbles. What hidden blow will crush Beijing next? In the shadow of twisted rails. That deafening blast not only crippled Russia's military lifeline. It also sent shockwaves through China's trillion-dollar plans. A pragmatic giant now facing a crumbling partner. Picture the icy grip of reality tightening, as Beijing's strategists sip bitter tea in gilded rooms. The smell of anxiety hangs heavy, like smoke from far-off factories. What if the leader of an empire can't safeguard his own veins? Shattering illusions of stability, the Peskov explosion exposed Putin's grim sail. He peddled China not security, but a treacherous corridor riddled with shadows. Trains laden with global dreams now whispered of betrayal. Strategists in Beijing suddenly awoke to terror. Their precious shipments, those beating hearts of commerce, now prey to unseen wolves in the night. Russia, once a vast, unyielding backyard, transformed into a swirling quagmire of fire and fractures. A single detonated bomb flung Beijing's world into chaos, diverting a river of trade from China's ambitious Belt and Road blueprint. Could this be the unthinkable pivot, where an autocrat's grip slips, dragging allies into the abyss? Frostbitten fingers trace maps in silent rooms. Logistic lifelines freezing under sabotage's glare. Hardened veterans calculate not just costs, but the humiliation of a superpower undone by homemade explosives. Taste the bitterness of risk jumping sky-high. Insurers in London's gleaming towers demand fortunes for every crate, pricing in partisan fury, as if navigating stormy seas cluttered with red flags. That oblivion train from Chang'an to Rotterdam? Once a swift artery, now choked with what-ifs and whispered curses. Chinese titans like BMW, Volkswagen, watch their ledgers bleed. Delays stacking like snowdrifts, sabotage tracks bleeding profits. European buyers recoil, their faith eroded, as the air thickens with doubt's acrid scent. For Putin, this was no mere wound, but the cruel theft of billions, each transit echoing lost command. Hear the distant rumble of opportunity slipping away. A tyrant poised on a cliff, his empire's roar fading into reproach. What hides beneath this unraveling tapestry? A deeper fracture in alliances forged on false promises? Railcars groaning to a halt, their metal groans foretelling doom. The twist emerges. Putin's stronghold, once the iron spine of global transit, now a hollow ghost, where every delay hymns downfall. As cracks widen, can even dragons endure fire from within? In the aftermath of that seismic blast near Peskov, insurance premiums skyrocketed, sabotage delays turned every train into a gamble of time and fortune, rendering Russia's transit pathways inefficient and unprofitable. For Putin, it wasn't merely a dent in reputation, it was hemorrhaging billions from every rudderless freight car destined for foreign shores. Imagine the shock rippling through the corridors of Beijing. Ukraine's shadowy partisans, with one cunning bomb, hadn't just halted a single locomotive, they dismantled Russia's entire economic lifeline for global trade. This catastrophe, laced with the acrid scent of charred metal and the echoing bang of shattered ambitions, forced a steely pivot from China's calculative eyes. Why cling to an unreliable ally mired in chaos when safer paths beckoned? Beijing, pragmatic and unyielding, redirected its colossal investments away from Moscow's fraying rails, pouring billions into the middle corridor, that lifeline threading from China through Kazakhstan's windswept steppes, across the Caspian Sea's choppy waves in Azerbaijan, through Georgia's rugged hills, and finally into Turkey's bustling ports. This new artery, a tapestry of seas and steel, shielded China's ambitions from the war's furious grip and Russia's internal firestorms. The Peskov explosion and past raids hammered home the peril, trusting Putin meant courting catastrophe. Funds once destined for Russia's crumbling infrastructure now funneled into swelling the Aktau port in Kazakhstan, fortifying Baku's hubs in Azerbaijan, expanding Caspian ferries that sliced through salty tempests, and upgrading Turkey's iron veins. Think of it, the tangible fear of derailments, the metallic thunk of faulty couplings keeping shipments at bay, the bitter sting of lost trust. For Putin, this shift spelled a brutal, long-haul thrashing, steeper than battlefield routes, because these evolutions severed more than transit dollars, they yanked away China's economic embrace and political steel. Russia, once Eurasia's invincible gateway, morphed into a toxic pariah of instability, supplanted by a smoother alliance of Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan. Picture the humiliation, a once feared titan reduced to a roadblock, as allies forge ahead without sparing a glance. What hidden fractures will this expose next, threatening to crumble Putin's grip entirely? As tensions mount, will this corridor ignite a global scramble, leaving Russia isolated in the cold? The stakes twisted tighter than rusted bolts. Ever imagined a world where one blast could shatter an empire's illusions, exposing cracks in alliances that once seemed unbreakable? That's the chilling reality unfolding in Russia, where a single explosion on that fateful October 21st ripped through more than just tracks, it ignited a global power shift. But as alliances crumble, what hidden forces are now twisting the knife deeper? Let's dive into how chaos in the East is unraveling Putin's grip on the world stage. The shockwaves from that railway devastation didn't end at the twisted rails between Pskov and St. Petersburg. They reverberated far beyond, striking deep into the heart of Beijing, where Xi Jinping's Grand Belt and Road vision shuddered. Faced with this logistical catastrophe, China's response was cold and calculated, no blind loyalty here. Why waste billions on a crumbling partner? Instead, China pivoted sharply, flooding resources into the middle corridor, that vital trans-Caspian route weaving through Kazakhstan, across the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and into Turkey. Picture the tangy salt air of the Caspian mixing with the rumble of expanded ports like Aktayo and Baku, ferries churning waves, and tracks humming with fresh investments, all bypassing Russia's turmoil. The stench of betrayal hung heavy in the air for Putin, a bitter reminder that Beijing preferred safety over strained friendships. Could this mark the dawn of Russia's exile from Asia's glittering economic map? Hold on, because as China bolsters these paths, Moscow faces a humiliation worse than battlefield losses, with its once indispensable role vanishing like smoke. In the unforgiving light of this betrayal, the ripples extended too. Russia's grip on China's support is slipping away. What if this crumbling alliance forces Moscow to lose its prized role as Eurasia's land bridge, replaced by nations like Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan aligning more closely with the West? Can Russia become a pariah on the global stage, even in Beijing's eyes? Shockwaves from the Pskov explosion rippled far beyond the twisted rails. They reached precious Beijing, and trembled in Minsk, Moscow's steadfast ally. The scent of burning steel hung in the air, a bitter taste of vulnerability. For Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, Russia's turmoil was a chilling alarm. Belarus's rails, weaving tightly with Russia's, pulses Europe's vital gateway for Chinese trade. He flashed back to 2022's early days. The icy crunch of snow under boots, explosions echoing like thunder, shattering the night. Partisans derailed trains, sabotaged supply lines. The heavy thud of derailed cars, acrid smoke choking the frozen wind. They'd halted Putin's march on Kiev, a direct threat to his regime. Now, those suppressed embers of defiance flicker anew. Could Russia's mighty FSB fail to safeguard Peskov's tracks? How could Lukashenko's KGB shield Belarus's fragile lines? Belarus's people lean west, their economy teeters on the brink. This shadow war makes aligning with Putin a gambit too risky. Transit fees from China could vanish, insecurity breeding sabotage. Lukashenko might turn to covert talks with the West, distancing from Moscow's chaos. Could this be the twist? Beijing's lifeline cracking under internal fires? That October 21st blast. It didn't halt a mere train. It obliterated Putin's Belt and Road Star role. His ironclad ties to China? Exposed as fragile fiction. The explosion sparked Russia's irreversible exile, from Europe's sphere, then Asia's economic heart. A nation unravels, from within, by unseen hands. Is this obscurity Russia's fate, or a veiled rebirth? The rails smolder still. What alliances ignite next? What if one explosion could shatter an empire's alliances, turning allies into wary bystanders? A single act of sabotage isn't just blowing up tracks, it's ripping apart the threads of global ties, leaving Russia exposed and isolated. Imagine the cold dread creeping into boardrooms in Beijing, as whispers echo of a weakened partner. Sensations flood the mind, the acrid smoke from charred rails lingering in the air, the earth trembling underfoot like a distant heartbeat. Just months earlier, In those tense winter days of famish and fear, residents in border villages felt the pulse of dissent stirring. Wooden floors creaked under careful feet, the faint crackle of hidden radios as partisans plotted in shadows, their breath visible in the icy gloom. As that catastrophic blast ripped through the railway near Pskov, it sent shockwaves beyond Russia's borders. Plans unfolding as expected could brand Russia as unstable, risky, even toxic to its eastern powerhouse. No longer the reliable gatekeeper. With bridges to the west already smoldering, now the last lifeline to Asia teeters on collapse. Who needs a troubled land bridge, when smoother paths emerge? Nations like Turkey or Azerbaijan beckon, offering steadier harmonies with the world. Putin's gamble in Ukraine torched Western ties, and now, internal chaos threatens to sever the eastern cord too. But the tremors reverberated deeper. Farther still, they struck fear in Minsk. Moscow's staunchest ally trembled at the news. For Alexander Lukashenko, any unrest in Russia rings alarm bells. Why? His nation's railways mesh seamlessly with its neighbor. And Belarus serves as China's vital hub, funneling goods toward European markets. Remember the early days of 2022. When Belarusian railway dissidents, brimming with fury, sabotaged Russian lines? Trains derailed amid the muddle. Red slowed Putin's Kiev onslaught. Back then, those acts posed a direct peril to the regime. Sensory echoes linger, the screech of metal twisting, diesel fuel soaking the frozen ground, hands gripping cold wrenches in the dead of night. Now, Russia's events kindle dread. If Moscow's mighty FSB falters, protecting a critical Pskov stretch, how can Lukashenko's KGB shield Belarus? A nation far more fragile economically, and its people leaning westward longer. The risks mount. Transit income from China could evaporate, as lines grow too perilous. Plus, a resurgence of sabotage spurs, pushing Lukashenko into covert talks with the West. Distance from Moscow seems inevitable. Thus, that Pskov bomb on October 21st halted more than a locomotive. It obliterated Putin's Belt and Road pedestal, and spotlighted the cracks in his ironclad bond with Beijing. Crucially, it sparked irrevocable drift, erasing Russia from Asia's economic tapestry after Europe. The iron stench of molten rails and crushed ambitions hangs thick, but what betrayal hides in the next shadow? Will allies crumble further, or awaken a storm of defection? Watch the fractures widen. Can you imagine a single blast shattering an empire's veins, turning Russia's icy stronghold into a powder keg of betrayal? Picture the frost-kissed streets of St. Petersburg, a city etched with the soul of Russia, its bold swagger, its shadowy fears. Above all, it's Vladimir Putin's fortress, where he drew his first breaths, honed the dark arts of power, and built the iron-fisted Siloviki network now choking the nation. While Putin unleashed chaos on Ukraine's mud-choked battlegrounds, Syria's sun-scorched sands, and Africa's forgotten edges, he clung to this northern Venice as his untouchable sanctuary. But Ukraine's eyes had pierced through, quietly watching not just frontline tanks, but the pulsing nerves of this imperial nerve center for long, tense months. Then, on October the 21st, 2025, a thunderous strike hit that web at its core, an artery vital to the regime's beating heart. That dawn, the roar echoed along the rail from Pskov to St. Petersburg, ripping apart tracks and Putin's fragile dream of a safe homeland. Russia's vast transit web was crumbling under relentless strain and hidden flames of treachery. This undeniable blow proved the conflict raging not only in Ukraine's fields, but deep in Russia's guarded core, the spots the Kremlin swore were impenetrable. How could one fiery shock bring a land stretching across 11 time zones near ruin? Was it mere chance, or the shadowy opening of a grander scheme to unravel Russia from the inside? Venture with us into this trail of scorched metal, down this forbidding path toward Russia's very marrow. As we delve deeper, recall that explosive quake, hearts racing, cold air biting the skin as workers discovered the carnage. On that fateful morning of October the 21st, patrol crews along the Kyiv-Pskov-St. Petersburg rail stumbled upon a nightmare unfolded below the ties. A potent device, buried in night's cloak, had warped meters of rails and concrete into a smoldering mess of bent steel, a surgical, war-grade wreck. Trains halted swiftly in both flows, birthing a tangle of stranded souls. Hundreds, then thousands of civilians trapped at St. Petersburg's Moskovsky and Ladovsky stops, queues snaking like veins in frost, ticket windows besieged. Panic laced the air, thick with the stench of fear and urine from frenzied crowds, fingers numb against metal. Rushed calls to bus hubs, trips dissolving, the first invasion of everyday existence by war's icy grip. Yet beneath this civilian turmoil lurked a lethal undercurrent, one the Kremlin feared far more. This track hauled not just folks, but Russia's army's life-giving cargo. It wasn't mere transport, it was the flow sustaining the Northwest Front. Pskov, no ordinary town, stands as a linchpin for Russia's West District, cradle to the elite 76th Guards Airborne Division, the VDV, bloodied in Ukraine yet hailed as the regime's sharpest blade. St. Petersburg? More than art's jewel, a colossal war forge, with Leviathan repairs at Kirov works, ammo mills humming, and Kronstadt dock cradling the Baltic fleet's very core. The rail binding them? The lifeline threading this war machine. Ammunitions fresh from the forges, tanks mended anew. Troops bound for slaughter, all coursing through here to Pskov's muster points. That blast on October the 21st hacked this cord clean. Tanks stalled, shells stranded, soldiers grounded, Ukraine had from afar choked the army's logistics with raw power. Worse, it neutered Russia's edge toward Finland and Estonia, those fresh NATO kin. A tactical win, yes, but a strategic rout, its terror in being echoed anew. For this wasn't novel ruin. Weeks prior, an echo blast scarred another stretch of the same line, by unseen hands. No fluke, but systematic, calculated siege. Ukrainian intel, the GUR, had sniffed the weak spot, poised to gouge until festering rot claimed all. This spurs dread. What's the Kremlin's deepest terror? Not Western bombs, but homegrown knives. Since the invasion began, Russian rebels allied with Ukraine, Freedom's Legion, the Siberian Brigade, and Atesh, have burrowed operations into Russia's depths. Not just swift border strikes, but sleeper nests of dissent, fueling sabotage from embittered souls. For them, rails are gold, their fragility, their sting. Russia boasts over 88,000 kilometers of main lines, enough to loop Earth twice. Yet Putin's grip can't shield every inch against the night. How to guard rails feeding Moscow when even this vital Pskov-St. Petersburg strand falters? In moonlight, they can freeze the sprawl, torch a signal hut, wedge a turnout, or blast a rail. But their might blooms not from drills or arms from afar, but from Russia's own. That's the admission Moscow dreads, a gray-haired villager sheltering fighters in woods, an insider leaker spilling convoy secrets. A lax guard waving bombs past checkpoints. War's toll, crumbling hunger, frayed morals, has stirred Russia's underbelly to quiet revolt, the home front partnering with foes. So, how does Russia fend against this creeping cancer? With pathetic, hollow stabs. Recall that sabotage spree, the regime's facade cracking. Putin unleashed FSB and Rosgvardia, granting them reign over the tracks. Towers sprouting like thorny warts, patrols thickening with armored beasts, elite squads seizing suspects on whim at depots. Yet it's futile, a thimble against a blaze. Russia's reserves are drained, best Rosgvardia scorched in Ukraine or holed up in Moscow and St. Petersburg, quelling uprisings. Guardians here? Sluggish, untrained ghosts posing as watchmen. Guard 88,000 kilometers? Absurd. Russia's expanse, once a shield, morphs to a guerrilla haven. This crafts Ukraine a new warpath, ditch hordes breaching fortified lines like Pokrovsk, Elsa's, sever the artery 1,000 clicks behind Moscow with one deft blow. Expect surges near St. Petersburg and Moscow's junctions, those veins to the capital. Cut them, and not fronts alone starve, but the heart city itself. Putin faces doom, lose the war or lose Moscow. It's checkmate. That October boom didn't just maim a track, it pierced Putin's shield of lore. War transcends map lines, now an empire bleeding from within, drowning in its veins. But reverberations surged further, rattling the veiled halls of Beijing's forbidden city. Xi Jinping's colossal global vision teetered, those blast-shaken rails twisting fate's loom. How far will the saber's echo travel before the titan falls?